AITA for refusing to remake my sister's wedding cake after she insulted my business in front of 200 guests? I run a small bakery. My sister hired me, for free, as a wedding gift, to make her 5-tier wedding cake. 3 days before the wedding, in front of her future mother-in-law and about a dozen relatives, she agreed out loud that my work wasn't professional and suggested I keep it simple so nobody would expect too much from me. So I packed up my cake stand, thanked everyone for dinner, and went home without saying another word. Now half my family says I ruined her wedding on purpose. The other half says I finally stood up for myself after years of being the family doormat. This story got long. There's a lot of backstory that matters, and there's an update at the end that changes things. So settle in. Let's start from the beginning. I'm 29. My name isn't important for this story, so I'll just be me. I have one younger sister, Danielle, who's 26. We grew up close, sharing a room until I was 14, matching Halloween costumes, that kind of thing. But somewhere in our teenage years, a pattern set in that followed us into adulthood. Danielle was the one people described as the fun one, the pretty one, the one going places. I was the responsible one, which is a nice way of saying I was the one nobody worried about, so nobody paid much attention to me either. That pattern showed up constantly. When I got into a decent state university, my parents mentioned it over dinner once. When Danielle got a B+ in a community college class, my mom posted about it on Facebook like she'd cured a disease. It wasn't malicious. I don't think my parents even noticed they did it, but I noticed. I noticed for 20 years. 4 years ago, I opened my own bakery. It's called Flourish. It's small, 1 storefront, 2 part-time employees. A modest but loyal customer base built almost entirely through word of mouth and weekend farmers markets. It took 2 years of grinding to get it profitable. I did the icing, I did the books, I did the 4 a.m. dough prep myself for the first year because I couldn't afford a second baker. When I told my family I was opening it, the response was polite but lukewarm. My mom asked if I'd thought about just getting a stable job instead. My dad asked if I had a backup plan. Danielle, to her credit, was actually one of the more supportive ones. She came to my soft opening and told people at her office about it. I want to be clear about that, because it matters for what comes later. This wasn't a sister who'd always been dismissive of me. There was real affection there, which is partly why what happened hurt as much as it did. It felt like a betrayal, not just an insult from someone who never respected me in the first place. Danielle got engaged about 14 months ago to her boyfriend of 3 years, Marcus. Nice guy, mostly stays out of family stuff, works in logistics. Their wedding planning ramped up over the following year, and about 8 months before the wedding, Danielle called me. Genuinely excited, gushing a little, and asked if I'd make her cake. Not like as a job, she said. As my gift from you. I want my sister's cake at my wedding. Nobody else's. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. I want to walk through the months leading up to the wedding in some detail, because this is the part people skip over when they judge this story, and it's the part that made the rehearsal dinner land so hard. We spent an entire Sunday afternoon, months out, going through design ideas. Danielle wanted a 5-tier cake, buttercream finish, a subtle amber from ivory at the base to a soft blush at the top, with hand-piped sugar flowers to match her bouquet. Ranunculus, garden roses, and a few sprigs of eucalyptus. This is not a simple design. Sugar flowers alone can take a full day per tier if you're doing them by hand, which I was. I did a full trial bake at the 4-month mark. Danielle came to my kitchen, tried 3 flavor combinations, vanilla bean with raspberry filling, a spice chai with cream cheese, and a lemon lavender, and picked the chai. She cried a little, actually, and said it was the best cake she'd ever had. And she wasn't just saying that because I was her sister. I did a second trial 2 months out, this time with the actual tier structure. Dummy cake stacked to show scale, with 1 real tier so she could taste it again and see the piping detail. She took photos. She sent them to her bridesmaids group chat. She sent them to Marcus's mother, Carol, with the caption, "Can't believe my sister is making this. I'm so lucky." I'm including all of this because it's important. This was not a half-hearted, my sister's an amateur, we'll see how it goes arrangement. This was a fully collaborative, well-documented, professionally executed project that both of us had invested real time and care into. Danielle insisted on paying for ingredients, about $340, but I refused to take a cent for labor because I told her from day one this was my gift to her. I bought a case of specialty gel food coloring just for the amber blend. I ordered custom cake boards. I blocked out 4 full days before the wedding on my bakery calendar, closing early 2 of those days, specifically to execute this cake, because a project like this can't be rushed. Now let me introduce Carol, Marcus's mother, because she's central to what happens next. Carol has, by all accounts, Danielle's, Marcus's, and eventually mine, run some kind of boutique event planning and hospitality consulting business for the past 15 years, mostly working corporate events and a handful of what she calls high-end social occasions. I want to be fair here. I don't doubt she's good at her job, but from the moment she got involved in wedding planning, she made it clear she considered herself the family's de facto authority on how things should be done. She questioned the venue choice, too casual, in her opinion. She questioned the florist, not editorial enough. She pushed, repeatedly, for Danielle to hire a day of coordinator from her own network, which Danielle politely declined because they'd already budgeted for a friend to do it. Small friction, the normal kind that happens when 2 families blend for a wedding. Nothing that had blown up before the week of the wedding. But cake was clearly Carol's pet issue. About 2 months before the wedding, she'd mentioned to Danielle, not to me directly, that she had concerns about a homemade cake for 200 guests, given logistics, transport, and consistency at scale. Danielle relayed this to me kind of as a joke. Carol thinks you're going to show up with a Pinterest fail. We both laughed about it at the time. I told Danielle I did this professionally, that I'd catered cakes for events with more guests than this before, and she agreed and said she wasn't worried at all. I want to underline that, 2 months out, Danielle was not worried. She defended me unprompted to Carol. This context matters for what I think really happened at the rehearsal dinner, which I'll get to. The rehearsal dinner was the Thursday before a Saturday wedding, at a private room in a restaurant Marcus's family had booked. About 30 people, both families, the wedding party, a few close friends. I brought a small tray of sample slices of the finished cake flavor, plus a photo album on my phone showing the actual finished tiers, fully assembled, from a final check I'd done that morning. I wanted the extended family to see it before the big reveal at the reception, partly out of excitement and partly, honestly, out of pride. I'd worked incredibly hard on this thing. Carol picked up a sample plate. She took a bite, and then, at a normal conversational volume that easily carried across the table. Not a whisper, not a private aside. She said something like, "Oh, well, it's cute that you're doing this yourself. But are you sure a real bakery isn't a better call at this point? No offense, but this isn't quite reception quality." There was a pause. A couple of people laughed, the awkward laugh people do when they don't know if something was a joke. I remember my face getting hot. I said something like, "It's actually made by me. I run a bakery, this is what I do professionally," trying to keep my tone light. Carol said, "Right, of course, I just mean for an event this size. Sometimes it's smarter to have backup." And then Danielle, my sister, who 2 months earlier had defended me unprompted, turned to Carol and said, laughing, "I know, I told her that too, but she really wanted to do it, so I just let her." Then, turning to me, still in front of the table, "Maybe just keep it simple? Nobody's expecting a professional cake anyway." The table laughed. Not cruelly, I think. It had the texture of a self-deprecating family joke, the kind that gets made at every rehearsal dinner about someone. But it wasn't self-deprecating. It was about me, made at my expense, agreeing with the woman who just publicly questioned whether my work was good enough. 3 days before I was set to deliver the single largest, most labor-intensive project of my professional life, unpaid as a gift. My mom, sitting 2 seats down, shot me a look, the kind of look that says, "Don't make this a thing." I didn't say anything else for the rest of dinner. I smiled through dessert. I hugged Danielle goodbye. I drove home and sat in my car outside my apartment for probably 20 minutes before I went inside. I want to be honest about my state of mind here, because I think it's relevant to how people should judge what I did next. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the exact wording. "Nobody's expecting a professional cake anyway," over and over. I thought about the 4 days I'd blocked off, unpaid, closing my business to other paying customers during wedding season, my busiest and most profitable time of year, specifically to prioritize this. I thought about the 8 months of trial bakes, the custom cake boards, the case of gel coloring I'd bought out of pocket beyond what Danielle had covered. And I thought about a pattern that went back 20 years, being the responsible one, the one nobody worried about, the one whose achievements got a passing mention while Danielle's got celebrated. I'd made peace with that pattern a long time ago, mostly. But sitting there that night, it didn't feel like an isolated rehearsal dinner joke. It felt like the newest version of an old story. My work quietly treated as less than, and me expected to just absorb it gracefully because making a scene would be dramatic. By morning I had decided I needed to say something, not out of spite, but because I genuinely felt like if I delivered that cake without addressing what had happened, I'd be confirming to myself and to everyone at that table that it was fine to talk about my work and me like that. That the joke had landed exactly as intended and I'd rewarded it with a beautiful, free, 5-tier cake. I called Danielle Friday morning, the day before the wedding. I told her I didn't feel comfortable finishing the cake after what happened at dinner, and that if she wanted, she should find an alternative, acknowledging it was late notice but that a grocery store bakery or a rush order from somewhere could probably still put something together in time, even if it wasn't what we'd planned. She was understandably in shock and then furious. She said I was being dramatic. She said I was blowing up her wedding over one joke. She said she couldn't believe I would do this to her the day before her wedding. I told her it wasn't one joke. It was her agreeing out loud, in front of her new in-laws and half our family, that my professional work wasn't professional and that nobody should expect quality from me. I told her that if she'd laughed it off privately later, or pushed back on Carol even a little in the moment, I would have let it go completely. But she'd amplified it. She'd handed Carol's insult more weight by seconding it herself. She cried. She apologized. Sort of. She said she didn't mean it like that she was just trying to keep the peace with Carol, because Carol had been difficult all week and Danielle didn't want to fight with her future mother-in-law 3 days before the wedding. She begged me to reconsider. I told her I would still do the cake. I hadn't touched it yet, it was still assemblable, but only if she called Carol right then and corrected the record, told her clearly that my business is legitimate, that the cake was made at professional standard, and that the comment at dinner wasn't fair. She refused. She said, and I'm paraphrasing but this is close to verbatim, "I'm not calling Carol to fight about your feelings the day before my wedding. I have 100 things to deal with. You're choosing the worst possible time to make this about you." That was the sentence that ended it for me. I told her I understood, wished her luck finding something, and hung up. I did not attend the wedding. I want to be direct about that because I've seen versions of this story online where people assume I showed up and made a scene, or that I sabotaged the reception somehow. I didn't go at all. I sent a card. I did not go to the ceremony or the reception. From what I've heard, through my mom, through cousins, through a few photos that made their way to me, Danielle ended up ordering a 2-tier cake from a grocery store bakery with about 36 hours notice. It was, by every account, plain. White buttercream, a basic piped border, none of the sugar flowers or amber detail we designed. Photos from the reception show it looking noticeably simple compared to the wedding's overall aesthetic, which had clearly had a lot of money and thought put into every other detail. I've been told Carol made another comment at the reception, something about how at least this one's consistent, though I wasn't there to confirm that firsthand, so I'll flag that as secondhand. The fallout in my family has been significant. My mom says I weaponized the cake to punish Danielle on the one day that was supposed to be about her, and that I should have swallowed my pride for one afternoon and dealt with my feelings afterward. My aunt said something similar, that I was petty, and could have addressed the comment after the wedding instead of leaving my sister scrambling less than 2 days out. A few cousins think I overreacted to one joke, that Danielle probably didn't even mean the way I took it. Danielle herself is not speaking to me. It's been about 3 weeks now. On the other side, 2 friends of mine, including one who's worked in event catering for a decade, have said that letting a client's family publicly disparage your professional work, and having the client herself agree with it, is a completely reasonable line to walk away from, gift or not, sister or not. My dad, somewhat surprisingly, has been quietly supportive. He told me privately he thought Danielle should have shut that down at the table and didn't. I go back and forth on this constantly. It was her wedding, the one day that's supposed to be entirely about her and Marcus, and I know rationally that a lot of people would say any personal grievance should get parked for 24 hours no matter what. Maybe I should have delivered the cake and had this conversation with Danielle the following week, once the dust settled, and let her actually sit with what she'd done without a wedding week deadline hanging over it. But then I think about the version of events where I stay quiet, deliver a 5-tier, hand-piped, unpaid cake the next day with a smile, and everyone at that rehearsal dinner walks away having learned that it's fine to talk about my work, and by extension me, like that, as long as it's dressed up as a joke and there's a wedding on the calendar. I don't know how to make peace with that version either. It's been about 6 weeks since the wedding now, and there's an update. Danielle reached out last week, the first real contact since the phone call. She asked to meet for coffee. She apologized, and this time it didn't feel like the rushed, defensive apology from that Friday morning. She said she'd had time to actually sit with it, that Marcus had pointed out to her afterward how the rehearsal dinner comment had looked from the outside, and that she'd been embarrassed once she really thought it through. She said Carol had, in her words, been a nightmare about basically everything wedding-related, and that in the moment, agreeing with Carol had felt like the path of least resistance rather than something she actually believed about my work. She also told me, unprompted, that she'd shown a few of her wedding photos next to my trial bake photos to some of her friends afterward, and multiple people had asked why she didn't just use the one from the sister, which she said stung more than anything else could have. I haven't fully forgiven the rehearsal dinner moment, and I told her that. But I appreciated that this apology didn't come with conditions or minimizing. We're talking again. Whether the relationship gets back to where it was, I honestly don't know yet. But for now, we're talking, and that's more than I expected 6 weeks ago. So, AITA for pulling my sister's wedding cake 3 days before the wedding, after she publicly agreed with her mother-in-law that my professional work wasn't professional, in front of both families? Let me know what you would have done in the comments, and whether you think the update changes anything.